Assalamu alaikum, peace be unto you. I'm making this video for many of my non-Bengali speaking friends because they often ask me still, Mufasil, why did you leave Islam in the first place and why are you back? I preached Islam, as you know, for over 3 decades, and then I made a video, if you recall, against the Paris attack, the terrorist attack, which went viral. And in that video, I condemned the terrorist attack against innocent civilians in Paris by an Islamist terrorist. Those were Muslims, I had no doubt. But after making that video, I received thousands of threats and harassments online. And that totally changed my life because I tried to defend Islam from a theological point of view, and I tried to defend Islam and thinking that Islam was a peace-loving religion because I preached it all my life. I know the religion as much as probably anybody could imagine. So I was an expert in comparative religion as well, and I was always involved in political analysis, how politics work in Bangladesh or Muslim countries. So I was quite, I would say, aware of what was going on in the Muslim world, theologically, politically. But when I started debating certain groups of Muslims on issues like why should it be justifiable for any Muslim to carry out such attacks, they started taking me back to the core of Islam. And they started coming up with absolute logical arguments which you could not argue back if you didn't go for interpretations. Words often do not convey the message unless you go for interpretations. I was running out of interpretations. So eventually, I left the religion and my harassments continued. I was the first man to declare apostasy from Islam online. But I took my time and I realized that how the Wahhabi Salafi Islam was being used to gain political powers, and how the clergy, there's a rise of clergy amongst Wahhabis where they command the obedience of the followers unquestionably, because you don't have much flexibility in that religion. So you can't be flexible. You can't even question, the authority of your superiors. It's like a militant group who are regimented in their actions. So I started mixing with apostates, non-Muslims, ex-Muslims, So I started knowing them more. I could see they were all hurt, and we were all united to vilify Islam in every possible way. Because we were suffering, we were getting death threats. We were, many of us were, thrown out of our countries. We were on the run for our lives, etc. So I started uniting ex-Muslims worldwide, and I did form the organization called BOBA. But as always, I'm a man who researches all the time. So I started digging deeper and deeper, and I started revising my understanding of Islam. And I eventually hit the nail in the head, and I found out it was all actually coming from Ibn Taymiyyah. And Ibn Taymiyyah took a certain aspect of Islamic understanding, jurisprudence, from Ahmed ibn Hanbal. That is, you judge a man by his amal or action, and you don't bother about qalb that much. Because even Taymiyyah, the 14th century Islamic scholar who took up arms against the Mongol Muslims, branding them as kafirs, and he justified jihad against fellow Muslims. that was a turning point in Islamic jurisprudence in history. After almost 700 years of Islam coming to this world with the hands of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, this Ibn Taymiyyah changed the total perspective of Islamic understanding. This rise of ultra-fascist, supremacist, Wahhabist Islam was born, because Ibn Wahhab eventually took up this Ibn Taymiyyah a few hundred years from there on, in the beginning of 19th century. So this ultra-fascist Islamist movement gained momentum because it rewarded its followers with power, with authority, with political force. And people get drawn by these things. And usually young people who do not spend much time or who are intellectually lazy, who do not know much about Islam, but they have other reasons for frustrations, they get drawn into it. So there was a huge influx of Muslims towards this new Wahhabi movement, which is shortcut, a straightforward, literal understanding of Quran, and that's it. So I started studying deeper into the history and anthropology of hadith collections. The hadiths which were questionable, but at the same time they were graded as sahih or authentic. So I did take up my independent endeavor to dig deeper into the anthropology of hadith collection, and found out conspiracies of various non-Muslim scholars who, with the help of many caliphs, for example, many of the Abbasid caliphs were hardly Muslims, and many of the Umayyad caliphs, they were hardly Muslims by any definition. So they were sponsoring Islamic theology, which were in fact not in any way connected with the original teaching, philosophical teaching of Islam. For example, Abu Huraira or Jafar al-Sadiq were thrown out from Sunni Islam. And on the other hand, the Shia Muslim brothers, they took Jafar al-Sadiq, took some of Abu Huraira, but they, for political reasons, their understanding of Islamic jurisprudence were also far away from the real truth, as I could imagine. So eventually I went back to Quran, and I started filtering other hadiths in the light of Quran, and away from the literal meaning, I started digging deeper into the mindset of great imams like Ahmad ibn Hanbal, who although supported interpreting Islam by amal or deeds, but not giving much priority to action, but he also or to qalb or heart, but at the same time he also cautioned not to look for hadith for every action, because that would make someone fasik or somebody who drifts away from Islam. So those things I started digging deeper, and they also supported Sufi Islam. I also Sufi understanding, and also I tried to dig deeper into the connection of various Islamic scholars one with other, and I saw that someone would try to learn something from another scholar, but that didn't necessarily mean that he would take anything at all from him. For example, Ahmad ibn Hanbal went to 400 plus scholars, and from them he didn't necessarily take anything all the time. Even then Bukhari, who is considered the greatest of hadith collectors, he was immensely influenced by certain scholars who were against the greatest Islamic scholar of all time, Abu Hanifa, who is considered as the greatest scholar by all Sunni Muslims. But Sunni Muslims nowadays, in fact, even Hanafi Sunni Muslims, they don't follow even Abu Hanifa, rahimullah. So after digging deeper and deeper and deeper, I found that you can hardly rely on a handful of hadiths, and why there's such vast importance given to Abu Huraira. And it doesn't mean that Abu Huraira, I shouldn't take anything from Abu Huraira, but what happened to other caliphs? Why Sunni Muslims shouldn't take more hadiths from the Shias, and why Shias shouldn't take more hadiths from Sunnis? And why there's a turning point in history every few hundred years. And I found out eventually that this Ibn Taymiyyah's fatwa regarding jihad was the main culprit. And this was taken up by Wahhabis, and Wahhabis eventually was supported by the Saudi regime, and they invested a lot of money. Medina University has this Dawah department which sponsors Wahhabi preachings, and that has spread all over the world. And a mixture of Hanbali and Wahhabi, Ibn Taymiyyah culture spread in South Asia and other parts. And Zakir Naik has been the main man behind this preaching of Wahhabi Islam in South Asia. And young people got drawn into it. Zakir Naik never actually had an actual debate, a scholarly debate. He picked up two Hindu scholars from randomly, and these two scholars, they were not experts in theological comparative religious studies, and they were not prepared for a debate. They were expecting a reconciliatory seminar, but he somehow dragged into a debate, and then he had a debate with William Campbell, who is hardly a theologian. Apart from that, he never debated an atheist like I did. He never a famous atheist. I debated famous atheist. Even when I was an agnostic man, I left Islam before I came back last year in May. I debated Umar al-Qadri, Dr. Umar al-Qadri, who is the head man of Islamic research and other centers prominent centers in Ireland. I debated with Imam Tawhidi and many scholars, Bangladeshi scholars. I debated with them, even online, offline. But Zakir Naik never did that. He never actually had a debate, even with an atheist or even with a famous Christian scholar. He never had it. So there is no way to call him a scholar. He never wrote a research work, well-referenced research work, scholarly work. Never. He never even attended a seminar where other prominent scholars of various opinions, differing opinions, would sit down with him and exchange views. He would rather organize the seminar himself or organize the gathering himself of thousands of people, where most 99% of them will be Muslims anyway. But he will be just asking, they will be asking him questions and he will answer it in one or two sentences, and there will be no continuance of the discussion, because these people are handpicked and their questions are filtered before they are given the chance to ask. But nevertheless, it was not a debate. He never had a debate, proper debate. He was not a scholar, and I couldn't find any intellectual in any of his lectures, none whatsoever. But he was good in stunting people. People were stunned, young generation was stunned that he could quote verses, from this and that, from here and there. I can do that as well. But many people started thinking that I like this guy. I never liked Zakir Naik. Whenever I was preaching Islam, then even I made videos condemning this guy. When I left Islam, I still condemned this guy. And I came back to Islam, still I'm condemning this guy. Because something was wrong about him. And I now can feel that Zakir Naik was the main man who in fact has been behind all my harassments and sufferings and he was the reason I left Islam, because he is the man behind preaching works of Ibn Taymiyyah, because he praised Ibn Taymiyyah on many occasions over last 10 years, but he never condemned or even gave his opinion regarding Ibn Taymiyyah's fatwa about jihad against fellow Muslims. What does that prove? That proves that he condones it or knowingly keeps silent about it. That means tacit amounts to acceptance. Silence is acceptance. And his followers, who were mesmerized by his charisma of memorizing verse numbers and quick answers to some ordinary guys standing up and asking questions, and most of them were young and didn't know much about Islam, because he never gave that chance. He never had any idea about wasila or intercessions. He never could keep up with the challenge of Sri Lankan Muslims who faced him and asked him questions regarding wasila. Then he went back and gave a lecture himself, but he never faced up to the challenge. So he was the main man behind all my harassments, because his followers were, as I said, were dragged by his charisma, because they didn't have much intellect as well, and they didn't study themselves much. They didn't have the opportunity of listening to other scholars like Sheikh Hamza Yusuf or other great scholars of living in other countries, or Tariq Ramadan even, or other scholars. They never do that. His followers never do that. So they were mesmerized by him, and they were also drawn by his preachings of Ibn Taymiyyah and his approval of Ibn Taymiyyah. That gave rise to serious problems, because young generation became drawn to this Ibn Taymiyyah and Wahhabism, which resulted in the Gulshan attack in Dhaka recently. If you recall, you will see that there was a terrorist attack in 2016 in Dhaka, where a few Muslims, along with other foreigners, were slaughtered in the posh area of Dhaka in a cafe, Gulshan. If you write just Gulshan, Gulshan, Dhaka, terrorist attack, Dhaka, terrorist attack, you will find out. And the guy who was caught, most of the terrorists were killed, but one was caught alive by the police, and he said that he was inspired by the teachings of Zakir Naik. And Zakir Naik denies that he condemns the terrorist attack, but that doesn't exonerate him from liability. Why not? Because he always admired Ibn Taymiyyah. His followers were dragged into Ibn Taymiyyah's teachings, and he never condemned the jihadi fatwa by Ibn Taymiyyah or Ibn Wahhab even. So he was always condemning other attacks with a caveat, always with a caveat. The guys who criticized me, harassed me, gave me death threats after I criticized the Paris attack in 2015 are the same guys who are now harassing me for condemning Zakir Naik, because I've been making videos criticizing Zakir Naik and Ibn Taymiyyah for the last 7 days. And if you read comments below those videos, you will clearly see there are hate messages, threats, abuses against me for speaking out against Zakir Naik. And they're calling me a kafir, they're calling me an apostate, they're calling me a munafiq, or someone who hides his real kufr or views against Islam. So they are branding me as someone who should be, in fact, murdered or killed, because to call a Muslim a kafir who is working against Muslim Islam should be killed. That's their view. So they are the Kharijis of today. The Kharijis were considered non-Muslims by all major Muslim scholars in history, and even Taymiyyah was put into jail several times. So they are the new Kharijis, neo-Kharijis, who are on the rise again. And so Zakir Naik and terrorism are directly connected. I am the victim number one. And I can prove it, because the same bunch of guys, many of them, were the guys who started abusing me when I did leave Islam, and those are the same guys who threatened me after I criticized the Paris attack. And they're the same guys who are harassing me now for going against Ibn Taymiyyah's teachings and for speaking out against Zakir Naik. So how can Zakir Naik wash his hands about Gulshan attacks? Impossible. He rather condones, he rather supports terrorism. I have no doubt about that. And Malaysian government did a terrible mistake taking him there. He should be punished. This man should be punished. I have sued Facebook for thousands of abuses and death threats I received online. And I'm in the process of suing YouTube as well. Thank you for listening. And you will see there will be abusive comments under this video as well from Zakir Naik's staunchest followers, who are nothing but terrorist sympathizers. And Bangladesh government and the anti-terrorism cell, they are failing immensely in arresting these guys and bringing them back, bringing them to book. Because they are not hiding their faces, they are not hiding their IP addresses can be located easily. Thank you.